congratulations on Labor Day. You and me were both employees, and after years of solidarity and years of whatever the employees have gone through in different segments and sector, we are finally celebrating this day with pride. Congratulations to you as well. So my first, introduction with you on a very specific topic that we're going to have today is on caught in the middle, balancing employee advocacy and employer expectations. It's a very mindful, aspect and topic that we have chosen because we are aware of what exactly, and how exactly an employer needs to balance both. Just to give a small introduction to it and a small backdrop of what exactly we'll be discussing today. In today's fast paced business world, employee advocacy has become a critical aspect of company success. You would agree with me. Employees are increasingly seen as brand ambassadors with potential to positively impact the perception of their employer's brand and influence consumer behavior. However, while employee advocacy can bring significant benefits to a company, it also raises concerns around, balancing employee advocacy with employer expectations. Employers also have expectations around productivity, confidentiality, and company values that may conflict with personal beliefs of people and preferences of employees. Thus, finding a balance between advocacy of employees and employer expectation is crucial to creating a harmonious work environment, fostering both employee engagement and business success. So, in today's exclusive interaction with Ms. Mishra, we'll understand the importance of employee advocacy, the challenges of balancing it with employee expectations, and strategies for finding a balance that benefits both employees as well as employers, considering, this is what drives an organization and leadership at a great level. And no success is complete without, having a balance between both in any organization across sectors. Ms. Mishra, over to you. My first question: what are the key benefits of employee advocacy in a workplace, and how can it impact the overall organizational success?
Firstly, Sugandh, thank you so much for inviting me on this critical day, and very happy to be speaking about this topic, which I think is increasingly becoming more and more relevant in the times that we work in now. So, very relevant question you brought up, right? I think some ways in which it really helps organizations is that it really supports amplifying of messages that the organization any which ways would like to do, and it does that with a lot more trust, credibility, authenticity, and believability in the target audience. Because, if you look at a CEO of an organization, an MD, a marketing head, an HR head, or any of the other CXOs, right? If I look at it from an audience perspective, people look at it as it's their job, to talk about the organization, to talk about the great things of the organization, its products, its work culture, etc. Whereas when you hear real examples, of not just say as an example policies, but the applicability of those policies or how they have benefited various people, I think that is where it really works, which brings in a certain level of authenticity. People believe that, okay, it's not just about talking about all these great things, but about how it has genuinely impacted people across the organization. So I think, that level of credibility that true employee advocacy brings in is unparalleled. And I think the benefits to the organization as well as people who are seeking, either employment in the organization or are looking at its products and services, both ways, they also benefit because they get the true picture, So that's where I think the benefit really lies.
Well, do you also feel, and I mean, could be your different belief into it as to how can we do it? How can employers ensure that their employees are representing, company in a positive way while still allowing them to express their opinions and perspectives? Because as an employee, I might have different opinions and perspectives ranging from wide array of situations that I am into on daily basis. But in an organization, though, my employer has given me choice to, express my beliefs and my thoughts, but then there is always a streamlined stencil into which, we have to put our thoughts. So, you as an employer, from an employer's perspective, how can you ensure that, while you're giving me space to represent, but you're also following that leadership or management mandate, to fit my beliefs and my talks and my thoughts into that stencil and not let me move out of it.
Again, Sugandh, it's an excellent question and something that I think as organizations and even as employees, all of us need to ourselves reflect upon. But I will say one thing, right, which is different from what you said. I would say that instead of saying positive messaging, I think we should look at balanced messaging. Right, all organizations have a lot of parts which would be positive, and then there are some things which for specific people don't work out, right? It's not possible that everybody on every product or on every experience only has a positive experience. I think even from a social media perspective, or when we're going and talking about organizations, people are looking for an authentic and balanced view. So, as an example, if something has not gone right with me, something has not gone well with me, how did the organization deal with it, right? Even if there were challenges, what happened after that? Did we learn from there? Did we do things differently after that? And I think that is the kind of thing that builds trust. So we are not looking at only positive mouthpieces who say, okay, everything is great. Because then again, that really becomes like, you're just touting your own horn and everything is positive, hunky dory. No, I mean, in the real world of existence where you're doing everyday business, some things invariably and not for your fault and sometimes unwillingly, do not go as you plan. But then after that, what did the organization or the set of people involved do about it? Did they listen to the people in question? Did they do something differently? So I would say that, when people are looking for views and things that employees are talking about, they are looking at genuine views. They are looking at genuine experiences, real things that have happened, and equally, what was the organization done about it? So it's
Hmm.
not so much about only pushing out positive stories. It is about pushing out real stories, but balanced views. And I think one thing that organizations can do to help people, right, is social media training. Because sometimes, with all positive intent, when people want to go out and talk about things, right, they themselves are not completely aware. It's not their fault, but they are not completely sure of what to say, how to say, and also sometimes, the implications of what they say and what it might mean to a certain section of people. So, just to be very sure of what are the meanings of some things that we put out there, I think it is wise, for organizations to also invest in social media training of people. I think we're all going digital.
Okay.
Everybody is present on all kind of digital formats. I think that really helps.
But Bhavya,
Employees.
don't you think if they're given so much of exposure of social media now, somewhere it backfires at organizations also at some point in time? Let's say, for instance, I'm not happy, with the kind of layoffs, for example, you've done. I mean, I'm not saying Lenovo has done. Let's say, for instance, you've laid me off due to certain reasons, of course, could be in a hurt that I'm laid off, or could be because of my performance basis that I'm laid off. And then I'll quickly go on to that social media. I'll rant all, ill things about Lenovo, forgetting what positive aspect also they've laid onto my personality and my character. But giving this much of authenticity to any employee that, if you are giving them space to even explore social media, it can even backfire organizations. And then you, from a leadership level, might be in a toil as to how to balance, of course, it is somebody's rant, we had to lay off because of certain reasons, but, he's ranting in a very negative aspect, not explaining why we've laid them off. So don't you think it backfires at organizations also, giving so much of leverage to employees over to social media?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And like I said, it's not a very easy area to deal with, right? That's what I said earlier as well. That
Hmm.
it's definitely a challenging one and definitely undesirable, right? As an organization, uh, if there is a story like that, you would want to put out the full context of why, etc. And I'm not going to comment
Right.
specifically on layoffs because at Lenovo, that's not something we're looking at. But having said that, in a larger context, if we look at negative stories or sometimes when people go out and rant, right? I think there is a positive way to look at it, Sugandh, because if you look
Okay.
at people, right, and we ourselves, forget just from an employer perspective, when you go to Zomato, right, as an example, or when you go to Amazon and buy something, right, there are always positive and negative views. As a consumer, also, when you read those views, you always look at how many positive and how many negative, right? If
Right.
there's one negative story out of 100 positive ones, then you always feel like, okay, maybe. let me give them a chance. Or, even something like Make My Trip, or when you're looking at an Airbnb, all of that. And I think all of us in today's time are exposed to so many of these platforms where you have genuine views, either from consumers or from customers or from employees. And I think, there has to be a certain level of trust that we have on the other side as well, which is a prospective employee or a prospective customer or a prospective consumer, to look at where does all of this lie and where does it add up. How many positive stories about this are there and how many negative ones are there? Also from the same set of people, right? And I think that somewhere helps balance, which is why I'm saying that, at the end of the day, always balanced views help. It's not just about positive and it's not just about that one off negative story. It's about overall what is it that you're hearing, about the experience of people, which is much more real than what you might hear only from the leaders or only from the websites, etc. Because frankly, also as leaders, also on our org websites, etc., we try our best to put the right picture forward. We do
Exactly.
want to have that communication, but just I think as people, as consumers, we always trust somebody else's experience much more than what's written, right? If you go to a hotel, you'll have a very fancy website of the hotel, but you leave all that and you say, okay, let me go and see TripAdvisor, Make My Trip, Airbnb, and see what are people saying about it. Is this, does it really look like this? And there are always those two sections, and I find it very interesting. When you go on any of these websites, there are those pictures, right? That whole gallery of pictures that the company or the hotel themselves have put out, and then there is that set of pictures which the travelers have put out. People are always more interested in seeing what does it look like from a normal phone,
Exactly.
not excellent photography. And I think that is the difference, that people want to see the life
Considering we
behind.
are not present there, so we want to visualize it that, if we are there, how will it look like? So,
Yeah,
yes,
a regular
pictorial
person like
representation is something that grabs attention.
exactly, a regular person like me, what does he or she experience? Whether it's an organization or a product or a place, right, that we are going to. And I think same thing for organizations. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say. Does
Okay.
that make
You
sense?
know, no, it does, but that also leads me to another query or question. While I've just mentioned layoff as a very layman example, considering, it's in the air right now, but there would be certain other potential risks around as well, around employee advocacy, apart from layoffs, of course. So,
Yeah.
how, as an employer, you mitigate these risks? And what are those risks according to you?
Sure. I think, let me start with one of the common ones, right, which is uh, lack of information or misinformation.
Okay. Okay.
Sometimes when people go out there and want to talk about, again, I'm coming from assuming positive intent, right? Assume that the person wants to do a good thing. But if they don't have full information, if they have incomplete information, then in that case, they will never be able to give a complete picture, or like I said, a balanced picture of what needs to be said. So I think that's one risk. And as an employer, you can definitely help and support that by providing a set of people who are really interested in going there and talking about it with more complete information on the areas that they're, of course, interested in, right? The other one, which I feel again, which is very common, is around the second one, which I feel is around conflict of interest, and sometimes confidential information. Again, if I were to go at it with a positive intent, maybe the person didn't intend, but like I said in my previous response, which is that if you're not social media trained, if you don't know what is the information out there, what is the information that is okay to be shared, and what is the information that is not okay to be shared,
Of course.
inadvertently end up sharing things which may not be in the public domain. And I think that is also very critical, that you feel like, okay, maybe this is something that can be shared, or it's just this information maybe people already know about it but people don't, right? And you put it out there on your social media, and before you know it, it's public news. Or another piece of thing, which is that you might not realize that what you may say may affect the sentiments of a certain group of people. And just because you've put it in a certain way, maybe you intend to put it like that, but the choice of words, the language that you use, and I think there are sometimes rightfully so, we have a very aware group of audience today, and every little thing that you put out there does go through a fair bit of evaluation. And I think that's the second risk, that you might end up giving out more information uh, than is required, or you may end up affecting, the sentiments of a certain set of people just because you didn't know how to put out what you wanted to say. So I think that's the second one. And then the last one, which is linked to what you asked earlier, which is that, one negative experience of a person may
Right.
overpower everything else. You may have done 1,000 good things, but then, one negative experience that the person has, which of course I'm assuming would mean a lot to that person, which is why the person is going out
Is going
and,
and
putting
ranting
it out.
about it, right?
Exactly. But I think that kind of, at least for a short period, tends to overpower and color everything that's out there in the media. And suddenly, people don't want to hear about anything. And even if you go out there and explain,
Also,
I think
Bhavya,
it's
it is a human tendency. I might do 10 good things with you out of the box on personal level also, but if there is this one thing and I've touched that string, hurt you in some way or the other, you will forget the 10 10 good things that I
yeah,
did to you.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is human psychology.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say these are the three risks that I think that are there, and which are huge risks, and which is why this becomes such a sensitive topic and a topic that you really need to watch out for, work, carefully on. Like I said, lack of information or misinformation. The second one is, around company confidential information or information that should not be shared in the public domain. And the last one is around one isolated negative experience taking over everything else which is positive and being put out there for everybody. So those are some big risks that I personally see in this whole program.
While in this whole process, the employer is trying to protect the employees as well as, company's identity in a good platform. Of course, an employer will never go out and say ill about their own employees. But do you think when it comes to, talent acquisition and hiring processes, it does affect you, I mean, you as an employer to onboard good talent? Because then they always have this preconceived notion that is already out. Of course, they do not know what the nitty-gritties of the matters were, but do you think it also impacts the hiring process?
Oh, absolutely. I think I already spoke about it, right? It's about everything. Will something that you read about a hotel online by a consumer not impact you? Of course it will. But I think, Sugandh, I really believe that in today's time, hiring is an
Hmm,
equal process. As the organization has to decide whether or not they want to select you, it's the other way around as well. An employee or a
exactly.
prospective employee should also have all the information that is out there. I do believe it's good. You should have all the information, and then you should have an honest dialogue with the employer. And I think there's nothing wrong with it for you to come armed with some questions to say that, okay, here is what I've read. What is your view on it? And I think depending on what that dialogue is, how well an employee is able to convince the employer of his or her credibility, and at the same time, how well an employer is able to convince the employee on what they have to offer, right? I think that is where a successful recruit is. It's not just about an employer convincing a person that you come here and having the upper hand. I think
It's
that
the
relationship is
it's both sides.
meaningful.
It's the other way around
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. So I think that it's good for people to have information, come armed with that information, ask the right questions. And it's so weird that so many times, and I'm pretty sure across anybody who interviews, right? At the end, you always keep some time to say that if you have any questions. And so often people don't have. And I always feel like, ask something. You must have read something about the organization, about something which is not good, which is troubling you. So that when you're taking a decision, at least you feel like, whatever was in my mind, if there were some cracks or crevices that I was thinking are unanswered, might as well put it out there and ask about it, right? And I think the way an organization responds to it should give you a clue.
Exactly,
And
it is the way that you handle it. I will as an employee see hundreds of reviews about your organization before joining, but it is the way you take it and the way you handle it at that point in time, not letting my preconceived notion come into the picture while I'm being interviewed or while you're interviewing me and checking my skills for a certain position.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said, it should always be an open, honest, and authentic dialogue. Whatever's on your mind, you ask me. Whatever's on my mind, I will ask you. And I think to that extent, I personally believe that we should encourage employee advocacy. We should provide the right set of information as can be provided, to employees to talk about it and encourage them to give balanced views, like I said, not just saying that, you have to go out and say only positive. If you had a negative, What did the organization do? How did they still support you? Or how did we help you after that? Because I mean, at least as employers, we would like to have a long-term relationship. In
Right.
any relationship, Sugandh, there are things which go well, a lot of things which go well, and there are things which do not go. It's also during slow times in your relationship, whether personal or professional. How do we react to each other? How do we come back and support each other? How do we learn more about each other? That is also a big test
No,
of a good
it is.
relationship.
It is important. While you always see through what exactly is going on in an employee's mind, and you try and incorporate it within the ecosystem's realm and see how the needs can be met. What if or how, in your view, can employers support employees who want to become advocates of causes outside the company while still maintaining a positive relationship with those employers? you know I might
Yeah.
be working for a cause at Lenovo, let's say, but I might have my personal causes as well that I want to support. I'm
Hmm.
not saying specifically that will go against the company, but as a personal human being, as an individual, I might have some other causes to support, and I want to advocate those causes as well. Now, as an employer, how you think you can still maintain a positive relationship while helping me, or while helping the employer support the employees who want to become advocates of causes outside company?
I think it's a great question, and it's also a tricky area, to be honest, right? I feel like all of us, right, especially at Lenovo, I can talk about Lenovo, right? We
Hmm.
want our employees to be multidimensional. It's not just about work. Obviously, I mean, we
Okay.
encourage you to have things and interests and talents which are outside of work, not related to work, other things that you are interested in, you're very passionate about, and want to go out and, kind of support. So I think it's great. And in general, my answer would be that it's a good thing, encourage employees to have, let's say, a life or interests outside of work. That's what makes you a holistic, contributor in your own life, not just at work, right? That's one part of it. But I would also say that we have to be very careful about looking at areas which are not conflicting from an interest perspective, right? Or
Okay.
areas which are not different from a value system perspective, right?
Okay.
Where you're going out and supporting organization has certain values, whereas outside we're going and propagating certain other values. The other layer that I would have, Sugandh, is for the leaders. If you ask me whether we like it or not, I will say something which may not be very popular, but then the truth is that if you're at a certain level and above in an organization, if you are a leader in an organization, however much you may not want, at all points in time, you are under the scanner, you are representing the organization. So I think the
Okay.
responsibility from a leadership perspective, even outside of work, in terms of what you're talking about, how you're talking about it, what you're putting out there, even if you might say that it's got nothing to do with work, invariably will get linked to the organization because you hold that position of leadership, of responsibility, of talking about the organization. So I do believe that leaders, even if we don't want, at all points in time, you have to be very careful about what you're saying, what you're putting out there, and whether or not it's conflicting,
Mm-hmm.
to what your role is, to how you're carrying yourself. So I do think that additional layer is there. And even for employees, I think we have to be careful about some things which is around conflict of interest, value systems, etc. But other than that, I do believe that, all of us have multiple interests, have multiple passions. And I think as an organization, we would like to encourage that because we do want you to be interested in other things, do big things in life apart from only succeeding at work.
Fair enough, Pavya. Your views and analysis to all my questions has been such that it has ingrained in me as to what exactly an employer also thinks. See, from an employee's perspective, I would always have this perception in mind: what I need, what I don't need, how I need it. But it takes courage to even understand what exactly goes in an employee's mindset as well, because you just don't have to advocate my needs. You're at a position wherein you also need to balance both, my wants, my aspirations, as well as sitting at the leadership level, also meeting the needs and demands of your company's management. If I were to, or if you were to, take away 5 key points from our discussion today, what would that be? When somebody talking about advocacy as a program, they should always keep these five tick marks or checklist, or anything that you could say in mind while balancing both.
Sure. I think the first one that I would say, Sugandh, would be that encourage your employees to have a voice. I think it will help them. It will also help you as an organization, right? So that's the first one. Encourage employees to have a voice. The second one is to enable, the first one. I would suggest that invest in social media training of at least the
Okay.
employees who are interested in doing this, because not all employees want to put themselves out there. There are some employees who are very interested, who are very active. I think for that set of employees, firstly, you should identify them, also help them and enable them through a social media training, because it's not just about putting the organization at risk or putting organization interests at risk. It's also about themselves, right? Sometimes when we put things, like I said earlier, out there, I may not myself be completely aware of what the implications of that will be.
Okay.
So I do think that organizations can invest in that, right? The third one is what I would say, like most programs, right? If we want to institutionalize a program like this, it always starts from the top, right? It's the cultural thing. If your leaders are out there talking about it, their own experiences, right? Not just their functional expertise areas, but even about other things, their experience of the organization, how they have grown, etc. I think it always encourages things down the line. Like everything, walking the talk at a leadership level always helps, right? The fourth one is again related to culture, which I would say that don't think about it as a program which is only pushing out pre-prepared positive stories. I don't think
Okay.
it's about. I think it is about putting genuine, balanced stories and experiences of people, which is what will give everything a certain level of credibility. Otherwise, you may do everything, but if the stories don't seem real, if they seem too fabricated, if everything is correct about them, if it seems like some expert writer has written everything, there's no genuinity in those. It doesn't seem credible, it doesn't seem authentic, and the whole program falls flat, right? And then the last one that I will say is that don't be afraid of challenges. There will be some issues that will be there. There will be a one-off thing which will be a negative experience. I think the more important thing is how will we deal with that. If there is a negative story out there, negative experience out there, it's not completely unheard of. You can't do away with everything that's negative out in the media, right? But how do you tackle that? Will take you a long way on a program like this, which is what will either encourage or discourage leaders and people to take it up in the future or not. So don't be afraid about it. Strategy around how do you deal with negative stories? What do you do? To put your point of view out there. So those would be the five things in short.
Thank you so much, Bhavya. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And the way you've summarized our whole discussion in 5 points is something very intriguing. And it's kind of a checklist that people should put in on their desktops or at their homes or in their offices. Because see, the responses and the solutions that you've just said or advocated, it is not some rocket science responses, or some rocket science beliefs. It is something that have been already there within an corporate realm, but we just need to be mindful of it, where to use which aspect and how to incorporate it within the ecosystem. So I hope this such important topic that we've picked up today on such an auspicious day for all employees as well as employers, or employers are also laborers, and employees. And we take pride in saying that, that we are laborers because we work for a cause. Every laborer, every employee or employer or leader is working for a cause. So together we need to try and make it possible as to how can we incorporate all the needs within one realm. People who still have questions, queries, want to ask anything in this aspect, you're free to tag Miss Mishra, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter. She'll be happy to respond to it, considering, she has such an analytical view about this aspect, and, she can share it from her own experience as well. Thank you so much, Bhavya. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And, you gave out time on such an auspicious day to impart your knowledge. We are highly obliged.
Thank you so much, Sugandh. The pleasure was all mine. I think a great chat, and I'm glad that you found it useful, and I hope some of our viewers also find it useful for their
Indeed,
organization.
indeed, indeed,
Thank you.
Bhavya.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, Bhavya. Have a nice day.